All right, here we are, Ditch Digger CEO. I got my partner Q here with me, and I've got a guy here that I love, man. He's an awesome guy, great friend of mine, and we've got a little history together. And it's so exciting when you see, entrepreneurs that know they're entrepreneurs at a young age. They see people in their lives that they can look at and say, I want to be like that. No, I want to be like my mom. I want to be like my dad, right? And this is one of those people. And so we have a lot of rags to riches stories in here. We've got a lot of 30, 40 year overnight successes. And then we got some amazing, successes that happen a little quicker than that. Yeah. Q?
Yeah, man. I remember exactly, actually, 4.5 years ago when me and you, when you bought me out of my job and gave me the opportunity to start True Mentors, and one of the first people I met was this person, and just to see the aura and the energy that he has and his mindset. And before he left, before he left, he was somebody I actually had a one-on-one mentor conversation because of you at Chick-fil-A of all places. I remember that. And he, so it's just, this is a humbling and amazing experience for me, because to see what he's done and to see where it is now, is because single-handedly in my mind, he's one of the best at it.
So here we are today with our buddy, Sam Mcbride. Sam, welcome, buddy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. I know a little bit about your upbringing, your story and all that, but never enough, and I can't hear it enough times, but I think the world needs to hear it.
Absolutely.
Where this entrepreneurial mentality came from that you've had ever since I met you when you first came in here looking for a job, and you could work anywhere. And you came to work for us, and I was like happy to have you. But I knew, and I think we had a conversation, man, if I don't figure out a way to partner with you and get you some interest in something, you're not going to be here forever, right? And definitely that, of course, that's what happened, which is awesome. So let's start though with kind of your upbringing stuff and how that went and where you got this doggone mind you've had all this time.
Yeah, I don't know the exact origins, but my grandfather was an entrepreneur, and so ever since I was a little kid, I've loved business. Like, I've just been one of these kids who, like, as a little kid, I loved business. And I remember selling candy out of my locker in junior high. Like, I just always had I used to sell my little sister my baseball trophies because she had a babysitting gig. So I was just always I loved business from an early age. And then I had the good fortune, I grew up with two parents who worked for big companies. And so I got to see at an early age what a company can be to its employees and also to the family. So my mom worked at McDonald's and my dad worked at Southwest. And both companies are arguably the best in their field. And you could see the sense of pride my parents had working for those two companies. And it rubbed off on me. I saw what a positive impact a company could have on its employees. And so I always just loved it, and I was into it from a really early age. And then I chose a college that allowed me to major in finance and entrepreneurship. So I got to kind of put some formalization around the desire. And then pretty quickly after school, I started out in finance. Very quickly realized I wanted to go operate and build a business. And I was lucky I had a mentor of mine who had found an opportunity to build a home security business. Went and did that with him. We were successful there. The company ended up selling to a strategic buyer, and then had the opportunity to come work at Rabine. And I'm sure we'll get into it, but I saw a real learning opportunity there. And then had the good fortune, two of my good buddies had invented RXBar and started the business, and they asked me to join them early on. So I've always had a desire, but I've also had a lot of good breaks, in that the people around me have had good opportunities that I've been kind of in the right place at the right time for.
Well, that was a quick story there.
I think we're done. No, I'm just joking.
All right, well. So tell us where, when you were a kid, as you saw your parents, like excited about what they're doing for great companies and all that. You saw the kind of, I use this terminology a lot, but the dignity of work you saw with your parents, right? for you to be a young man, looking, I'm sure your parents would have paid for whatever you needed anytime you wanted, but I know you loved having your own wad of cash in your pocket that you earned. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't just that they loved the companies that they worked for and they felt a lot of pride in the work they did, but one of the things I distinctly remember is both of them talking about the leaders of the businesses. So for my mom, Fred Turner was someone who had a huge impact on her early on, and my dad, Herb Kelleher, who just recently passed away at Southwest. And these guys were huge personalities, were at the center of their businesses, and so I had a good sense of what amazing leadership looked like. And that was one of the things I was particularly lucky at McDonald's, because my mom, she was a part of their internal communications team. And so as a part of that, she was close with the board at McDonald's. And McDonald's being the company that it is, the board of advisors there are some really, really impressive people. And so as a 14-year-old kid who just loved business, I would go to the shareholders meetings. And I mean, these are public, so it wasn't like I was like in the boardroom or anything, but I got to build relationships with different people on the board and got to see really on a personal level what amazing leaders looked like who were in these really influential corporate positions. So, at an early age, I just had an incredible amount of exposure to really, really strong business leaders and like fundamental business leaders, packaging, paper manufacturers, not a highly funded tech startup, but somebody who's kind of an old school business person who did it, profitably and over time and slowly. And so I had a lot of exposure to that type of business.
What characteristics do you think you picked up early that would you'd say that assisted you to the opportunities of connecting with other people today?
So I called one of the board members at McDonald's once because I was curious if he saw any consistent character traits of the CEOs that he'd seen at McDonald's. And so I asked him, are there any consistent character traits? And he said, there's a bunch of different styles. Like I've seen people who are micromanagers. I've seen people who are big charismatic leaders. The one thing that's consistent is that the best leaders are trusted and respected. So however they get there is sort of their style. But those were two things that he said he saw consistently across decades of McDonald's CEOs. And, he's in a pretty unique spot to watch that. So
Absolutely. I mean, it seems simple, but it's not. I mean, right. I mean, for somebody can be honest as can be, but they don't have the emotional intelligence to connect to enough people to be trusted enough. Right. But to be able to, to have that with everybody on board, right. Everybody that's working every day for you, isn't always common. Yeah. But when you have that, right, now you got everybody moving in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. And it gives you a lot of leeway. So if people trust you and respect you, when there's tough times or you have to make changes that people are maybe like 60% on board for, you're more likely that they're going to say, I'm going to give this person the benefit of the doubt. Whereas if you don't have that, you better be right and clearly right all the time, or people aren't going to follow.
Yeah, and they're going to forgive. They're going to forgive you when you make mistakes. They're going to forgive when you maybe pivot and you go the wrong direction. Right? They're like, you know what? I trust them. We tried, right? And we'll do it all over again, right? Together. And you're right. Sometimes you'll see team members fall off fast because the trust isn't there, even in a pivot that turns out to be a great pivot, maybe, right? Yeah. So neat. And then okay, so when you think about your first jobs, when you 14 years old around these great leaders and starting to absorb this stuff. Now, when you got into your first jobs, how did that affect you? And how did that make you think differently than somebody next to you? What differentiated you from the young person next to you, maybe in the same job that didn't quite create the same opportunity you did?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing was that. And this comes from my parents seeing how hardworking they were. I liked it. Like I liked being an umpire. I liked being a caddy. I liked mowing lawns. I liked the commerce. I loved the process. And so I think the first differentiating factor as a 14-year-old is I really wanted to work. I really liked it. And so I I probably had 10 jobs by the time I was in high school. I washed dishes. I worked at a golf course. I fit golf clubs. I was a caddy, umpire, referee, lawnmower, babysitter, you name it. I loved it. And then I remember as a kid, I loved the idea of making money and then putting it in a bank account. I just thought it was so cool that it could then sit there and you earned interest on it, you know? Yeah. And it was such it seems like such a basic concept, but as a 14-year-old, that was pretty amazing.
But that was back when you can get like 6 or 7% on
That's true. Yeah.
And your money in the bank, right? And today it's tougher. But either way, no, you're right. It's just fun to be able to, like you're saying, put money away, and then all of a sudden it grows a little bit. Wow, what happened there?
Yeah, my dad he would walk us to the bank so we'd go deposit our money, and we had U.S. Bank was our bank, and they had these like kids checking accounts that were kind of like friendly and colorful, and you'd record how much you put in and how much interest it earned from the last time. And I can still remember doing it, and then before, so once you're 18, you can open up a brokerage account, but probably around 14 or 15 years old, I started asking my parents, instead of Christmas presents or birthday presents, can you guys just give me like $100 into a Fidelity account that I can run? And so they had to set it up under their name because I couldn't do it. But so then I started taking it to the next level. Instead of putting it in a U.S. bank and just earning interest, I would go and I would put it into companies that I thought were good companies to invest in. And it was really basic analysis. You know, I mean, I'm 14, so I wasn't doing anything super complex, but I would read what Warren Buffett was doing. And then of all the companies he liked, I would pick the ones that I especially liked. So I still remember my first stock was Steak and Shake, S&S. And then I bought Motorola for a while. But as a kid, I just got into it and saw how money worked and how investing in companies worked. And so it was always just kind of top of mind for me.
It's something that first experience in the bank it mattered to you, right? You remembered U.S. Bank. I remember Fox Lake State Bank, where I started my Christmas club. I had my newspaper out, and I started this Christmas club, they called it, where I got some credits towards Christmas gifts to start it, and have so much money in it. And I'll never forget it. Fox Lake Bank I had till I was a $2.5 or $3 million company, and they never would give me a line of credit. Never had one. Didn't know what one was until I eventually shopped for a little better situation and left Fox Lake Community Bank. But again, you'll never forget that bank, the experience, that person, right? That and again for you, that was a cool experience, right? And now, like you're saying, trading. Do you still do some trading today on the lessons you learned back then?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't call it trading, but there's still I'll pick companies that I think 20 years from now, and so those kind of Buffett principles of not trading but investing in companies, that's still the only thing I really do. I'm not smart enough to trade in and out of things, but I'll pick companies that I think, hey, 20 years from now, these guys have an advantage, and I think it'll still be there. And I'll put money and I'll sort of park it there.
Buffett principles. He needs to create a book. He probably does already.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Good deal. So I'm pretty sure Gary won't ask this, but how did you meet Gary? I think that'd be facetious. Like Gary said, how did you meet me? So how did you meet Gary? How's the connection? How did that happen? All of that good stuff.
So I don't even know if I've told you this story, but so when Gary and I were introduced, I was in the home security business, and a good friend called, and she was a recruiter, and she had been hired by Rabine to recruit for this position. And so she calls me and she says, "Hey, you're in marketing and sales, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And she's like, "I have this client who I keep getting candidates past the first guy, and then they meet the CEO and he doesn't like them. And she's like, I'm going to lose the client if I can't keep sending them candidates. Will you just go take an interview for me?" She's like, "I know you're not looking." And I was like, "Sure, why not?" And I'm always curious and to learn about another business. And I figured, what's the worst case? I see a pitch, and what harm can come of it? And so the first interview went well, and Anthony at the time called me back and said, "Hey, I want you to come meet Gary." And again, my plan was not to come work here really, but I figured now I'm like, I got to at least meet Gary, And so our interview was scheduled for like 45 minutes or something. Like 2 hours later, we just hit it off. And I'm sure anybody who meets Gary can feels this way, but he just sort of like pulls you in. And I was like, I could learn so much being close to this guy for the next period of time. And so that was it. I was introduced to a recruiter.
I didn't know this.
Yeah.
I thought you seriously wanted this job, man. Come on. Huh. Wow. That's funny. I remember that, you're just so entrepreneurial for a young guy, and you're like, wow, you asked me a lot of great questions that most people didn't ask me, right? Most people didn't have the guts to ask me some questions Sam asked me back then. And I was like, man, I remember saying this when we finally, I don't know if it was then, but probably when we determined that we really wanted you on board. My thing was, gosh, you know what? You're going to be successful. You're going to be a successful entrepreneur somewhere. I just hope I could figure out where you can be a partner here. Otherwise, you're going to go somewhere else. And hey, that's okay. I remember, we talked about that. I said, I've had a few people that have gone from here to be successful other places, and that's really cool, right? I get as much out of that as if they're on our team and they become very successful. So again, I remember the conversation. Then I remember, all the things you did in our organization were awesome. I mean, you started in marketing, but really became more of a sales manager, and you were a salesman, sales manager, marketing man. You end up to do like anything you were asked to do and more. Operations, I think you dived into operations to help out. And at the time, we had some people that would drop the ball here or there, and somebody would pick it up, and Sam would pick it up. But I'll never forget the day you walked in here, right where you're at now. I think, right, is where we had the conversation, and it was like, Gary, I really like it here. I didn't plan to leave really leave this organization. I figured we'd have opportunity to partner in something, whatever. But I got to tell you, I got a great opportunity, and I was like, oh man, I'm thinking about why the opportunity, as he's telling me about the opportunity, thinking about why it can't be as good as what we can offer him here, right? But everything he said, even though he's taking a cut in pay, he's taking a lot of risk, right, to take this new job in a small company, and I was like, oh, Sam, you're taking risk here, man. But then I also thought about, well, he doesn't have that much risk, because I'd take him back in a heartbeat if something didn't work out, right? So either way, I remember that day like it was yesterday, and I'm so happy that it worked out as amazingly well as it did, and I know you've had a lot of fun. So yeah, you can start there or whatever, and tell us how things are going. But
RX, man, started where? How did it? Two friends came to you, and then what happened next?
Yeah, well. So before I get into RX, because it relates, one of the things that I learned here that I brought to RX that was invaluable is this idea of passion and the way that you go about building relationships and selling to people, especially in a big corporate environment like a Walmart or a Target. That was something I had no experience with. And so when we met, I thought, first of all, you had sold me, and I always like to joke, like, you could live in a condo in Chicago and you spend a half an hour with Gary and like you're ready to buy a 100,000 square foot, 8-inch depth concrete parking lot. So one of the big things I took away from here was how you connect with people and how you build those relationships with big companies, and that would serve us well at RXBar. But so the way RXBar happened, like I mentioned earlier, I was lucky. Two of my closest friends had started RXBar, and they had this very simple but great insight, which was there's protein bars, but they have long lists of ingredients, and then there's clean bars like LaraBar that don't have much protein. And why hasn't anybody put the two together? And at the time, CrossFit was at the center of their lives, and in CrossFit, a lot of people are paleo eaters, and there really was not a bar for the paleo consumer. And so that's how, when they were making the product, they came up with egg whites as the protein source, almonds, at the time it was half a fig, and dates as kind of the base of the bar. And so they solved a very clear niche consumer's need, which was, if you're a paleo eater, or if you're doing a Whole30, or if you're just a super clean eater who wants a lot of protein because you're working out really hard, there's not really a product. And if you had looked at the business in 2014, it was really a CrossFit brand, which is very narrow, in the grand scheme of brands. And one of the things I learned at LiveWatch, the home security business, where we catered to a really niche consumer as well, a DIY consumer, is the niches are really powerful, because you can market and sell to niches in a way that you can't to the mass market, because they immediately understand the product. They're going to give you a lot of leeway in terms of your ability to explain the product well, because they're going to understand it. So there were, believe it or not, a lot of similarities between LiveWatch and RXBar when I first started talking to Jared and Peter. And originally we were just talking kind of just about their business. I was excited that two of my good buddies had started this business.
Now, good buddies, this is like not just normal good buddies. This is like from grade school, right?
Yeah. So we've known each other since 4th grade. Jared and I grew up playing basketball together. Peter at basketball? Jared. No, Jared's better. Peter was the best man in my wedding. We're super close. But I was just excited. They had started this business and they had traction and it was working and people were buying it and they're starting to get some attention. And I was just super excited for them. And so we started talking about the business, and there were some things that we'd done at LiveWatch that I thought might work at RXBar, especially when it came to selling a product online to a niche. There were some similarities. And so one day they were like, hey, do you want to come do this with us? And so that was kind of when you and I had our conversation, and it was a great opportunity for me.
And at that point, the branding was pretty blah. I mean, good. I think there's some cool ideas within it, right? But it seemed kind of blah. Didn't excite. The packaging didn't excite me, you know. But it was so young that it didn't really matter in my opinion. But boy, when I saw the branding change and I saw you're marketing to a mass market. Soon after the things that I saw, I was like, oh my God, they're going to kick butt. This is awesome. And then I'm eating them all. I'm sorry, I wasn't crazy about them at first, but then after I had a couple or 2 or 3, I'm like, whoa, wait, I'm liking this a lot. Yeah. And I think I called you a couple of times. They stick in my teeth a little too much. And you're like, yeah, Ray, I guess because you're old, right? Or no. Bottom line though is I remember a few things and it seems like you just slowly changed as probably people would say things, but man, I always liked the taste after the first few, right? But it just got better and better, and so
so the thing we were able to do a couple things well, but one of them was we could stay in that niche for a while. And so when we had the packaging you're describing, it's kind of traditional packaging. It had a big brand, clip art picture of a blueberry, some call outs, but it really didn't stand out in any way. And what it really didn't do was clarify what the value of the product was. That was the big missing thing. But because we were selling it to mostly CrossFit people, paleo people doing Whole30, we didn't have to be great at communicating the value proposition because that consumer was so thirsty for it. Yeah. And so they would turn it over and read the ingredients and understand the value proposition that we weren't really being very clear in communicating. And so what we were able to do is we could keep selling to that niche and that market and keep growing the business while we really figured out in our minds what's the value proposition that can cross the chasm from this narrow CrossFit community to a broader mass audience. And so the time that it gave us, the fact that we could continue to grow the business but still focus on like how do we get it to that next phase was invaluable. And it also it allowed us to build the business profitably. We didn't have to take money, which meant we got to do everything on our own terms. So we didn't have a board. We didn't have, a fund trying to get us to exit or raise another round. We could really do things on our own terms. And that was also incredibly valuable. And the packaging, in retrospect, people are like, oh, the packaging's brilliant. And the funny thing is when we first got to that packaging, we still had like 4 or 5 months of the old packaging, and we didn't have any money, so we had to sell the old packaging.
You had to use it up.
Yeah, we couldn't just discard it. And so we had this little laminated roll-up that we would take to trade shows, and just anybody who would look at it, we'd show them, we'd say, look, this is what it's going to look like, all excited, this is the future. I'm not kidding. Everybody was like, that is terrible. Like, there's no taste appeal. No one's going to know what it is. The brand is too small. I don't know what flavor it is. And we showed it to experts, buyers who said, one buyer told us, I'll never take this.
Wow. And because of the packaging.
Yeah, because of the packaging. but we knew the consumer so intimately because we had been selling online. So like we literally knew people by name because they would call us. And whenever somebody called customer service, every phone in the office rang and one of us would pick it up. So we knew the customers literally by first name. So we knew the consumer would get it. But it's just funny because most people did not think it was very good at the time.
So what they didn't think was good was, maybe they were just thinking of the commonality of the packaging of all these other, all the other competitors, right? And this was so different and kind of bland almost, right? It's just not enough sexiness to it, right? But your message got across on that packaging fast, and I think that's what I saw as the key. Your messaging was so clear, so simple and so clear that I think that's what sold it.
Yep. Yeah. And we didn't tell people. There's a lot of, especially in food, there's a lot of preachy marketing that says, do this and you'll be this way, and, eat this and you'll be like me. And, and we were just kind of like, we don't really want to be a preachy brand. We want to tell people what it is, be pretty straightforward about that. And then our customers are smart enough. They can make their own decisions. We don't need to tell them this is going to turn them into a mountain climber.
Yeah, I mean, how more transparent can you get, right? 3 egg whites, 6 almonds, 4 cashews, 2 dates, and no BS.
And that's the part that the no B. How did you all? Because that right there. For example, I'm running because I run a lot, right? I'm not into the CrossFit, but I'll listen to some Pandora, and then all of a sudden I hear RXBar commercial come on, and literally the only thing I can remember is no BS, and it makes me remember RXBar. No, like, how did you all think of that aspect of it? Like, how did that all come together from a marketing scheme? Because I think that's probably helped you all's success in the way that it did.
Yeah. So in the early days when the first package was being designed, Peter and Jared were listing the attributes. So gluten-free, it was no gluten, no soy, no dairy, no BS was the original 4 claims. And the no BS came from, I think they kind of just felt like they needed another one, and it kind of like wrapped up everything. Like it sort of felt like it like encompassed all of the claims, and it also spoke to the simplicity of the product. And so it's been there from the beginning, but one of the design decisions to make that really a huge part of the packaging. And that was the other thing. People were like, you guys are crazy to print no BS in huge letters on all your packaging. And we even had some buyers who for a while would say, my shoppers are religious. They don't like, swearing. We'd say it stands for no bad stuff.
Yeah. That's on the kids, on the kids brand. The kid that you have, it says
bad stuff,
no
right.
BS, no bad stuff. Right?
Yeah. But it became kind of a filter.
I say everybody's gonna be so negative.
I'm just saying, man. God.
Yeah, they assume negative intent with it. But it became a filter for us in a bunch of ways. So no BS became a way that we thought about doing business. It became a filter for us when we created new products. It became kind of a filter for the way we worked internally. It became kind of like a corporate filter in a bunch of different ways. And so its meaning evolved over time. But when it came down to it from the product side, it was just that this is a simple product. And that's the other design decision that's unique is we don't have gluten-free symbols. We don't say there's no soy, no dairy. It's not paleo certified. We don't do any of the sort of, we call it like race car. When you race car your product, and you put all these logos all over it, because we felt like
that answers the question. I mean, that tells it all right there.
Yeah, right.
I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, so now when you came on board there, I remember you telling me, I'm saying, well, what size is this company, Sam? Is it big enough to support your appetite for to kick ass and to grow? And Gary, it's I think you told me it's a few $100,000 in revenues or whatever it was, right? Is that about what it was?
So I joined in late 2014, and we finished that year just over $2 million.
Okay. So what was it that's what it was when you came on board?
Yeah, they were on pace to do pretty close to $2 million.
So a couple million dollars, and I'm like, man, how are they going to support you? You're a guy that needs to well, and you had the confidence. Hey, I believe my value to my buddies can really help us, help us and grow huge. And and you're saying, no, Gary, I'm confident we're gonna do really well with this, and they're gonna give me options and opportunities to do more and be a bigger chunk of this and all that, right? Yeah. So I mean, I loved the courage you had, right, to just jump off and go do something making much less money, and then so tell us what happened after that. So you're on course to $2 million the first year you're there, and tell me how things went.
So the big thing was the thing that really appealed to me is that there was an opportunity to go to market in a different way. So the big disruption that we made on the home security business was we removed the installer. So immediately we became a national distributor because we didn't have installers because people installed it themselves. And so when Peter and Jared were explaining that they really weren't going through distributors, they weren't going to traditional retailers, they were selling them CrossFit gyms and online, it was kind of the same principle that there was this unique way, big differentiator on the way to market. And so that's what got me excited, was that we could go a different way when everybody else in the industry was going this sort of traditional way. And so 2014, we were basically purely RXBar.com. And some people were buying it for their homes, pure direct-to-consumer sales, and then some people were buying it for their gym, their CrossFit gym, which we would call B2B. And it was kind of a 50-50 split. And then in 2015, we really pushed. So that was when we layered on some digital, paid digital, but what we really leaned into was building a community on Instagram and email marketing, and then also building an inside sales team. So those three things we focused on to build out the direct-to-consumer and then the B2B business, which is like the CrossFit gyms. So what was unique about that is the model was profitable. So we could hire a handful of people to go build this without having to go raise money or change course or have to go chase these huge POs. We really built this engine that would build the business brick by brick, consumer by consumer. And it was really unique to the industry at that point. And on as far as Instagram goes, we were on the cutting edge of influencers. So today, influencers are like, everybody knows the strategy. It's no secret anymore. But back then, one, there weren't any analytics to track it, and no one had really done it. So you had to, one, have the autonomy to do it, which meant you probably had to be private. And two, you had to have the gut instinct that it was working to keep doing it. And the unique thing that we did was a lot of people, when they want to do an influencer strategy, they hire an agency that says, hey, here are 500 influencers. We'll reach out to them. We have relationships with these people, whatever. And the fundamental problem with that is it's not authentic at all, because the influencers get reached out to by a PR firm on someone's behalf. It's like you're immediately in between a broker. And so what I would do is lay in bed and direct message Instagram influencers. And I would just say, hey, we have a product that I think you'll like. No strings attached. Can I just send some to you? And literally, like, we're not asking for anything in return. You're just a consumer who we can see would like these, and we want you to try them. And we would focus on people with relatively modest followings, as low as 2,000 followers in some cases, because we really wanted to prioritize building this authentic community of people who understood the product intimately and who are really evangelists for it, not paid by a firm. And so it at first maybe didn't feel like a huge impact, but over time you build this big community of people who are genuinely in, not because a PR firm signed them up for 30 days of influence. And we built this really unique engine, and it really was like a ground up swell, right? And so that was a huge thing. And then we layered on a really strong email component of our business, where we would help our inside sales team be really efficient with their time by helping manage some of the communication to those B2B accounts.
When you track as far as like the Instagram followers or influencers, what would you say is not the ROI on that, but how many, by doing that strategy, how well did it work? Because I think that's pretty cool, man.
Yeah. I mean, so it was one of those things that you can't track it. I mean, you can follow it and you can have a gut on what's working, but you can't say it was a $3 per new customer. It's just not possible. Or if you do that, you're going to stop doing it because the numbers don't look good if you try to track it like that. So for us, it was more like we could see it because we were in it every day. We were posting on our own account. We were following people who were in the space. And so you could just see that slowly, like, RXBar was working its way into more of these feeds that we thought were a part of our core consumers' lives. So whether they were foodies, paleo influencers, Whole30 influencers, you could just see it. It was like you could feel it. You could see the engagement was picking up, but it wasn't like a black and white numerical ROI kind of thing. It was just you could
Just
tell.
see a lot more people.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
And you wouldn't be able to do that if you weren't as small a team as we were, managing the business so hands-on, because you'd be too far removed from it to know it was working.
How many people on your team at this point?
So there were 4 of us in 2014, and then by the end of 2015, I think there were like maybe 10 or 12.
You see that right now? So I looked it up right now. He had over 51,000 posts. 51,000 posts of RXBar. And it's obviously they didn't do it all. Like,
that's right now.
People all right now over literally this. Like, and so what he's talking about is not. I mean, I don't even know who this person is. She's all the way in Kansas, Kale Couture. You just got some connections with us, Kale. All right, Callie Couture, right there. Over 1,000 likes, and that's just off of hers. So what he's talking about is extremely cool. Awesome. He's talking about influencers. I'm assuming Anna. There you go. All right, Anna. That's pretty cool, man. SamYou'reTheBomb.com, buddy. That actually works. We might need to start doing some of that for True Mentors. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. And what type of commercial marketing did you do? Where'd you spend money on the old school type of marketing? Anything there?
So in the early days we didn't. We started to experiment with paid social, so on Facebook and Instagram, and a little bit of AdWords in late 2015 is when we started to really kind of put a program around tracking it. And in those cases, you're tracking like a very specific ROI. And then we would do some Amazon advertising and things like that. But it wasn't until, late 2017 that we did real out-of-home, billboard, TV, kind of traditional marketing. And by that point, we were distributed widely. So you could find us in a Walmart, a Target, Whole Foods, you name it. And so by that point, you could make the case like, hey, a TV ad might work. Whereas back in the day, you could only get them at CrossFit gyms and online. And so a TV ad was just didn't make any sense.
They could love the ad, but couldn't find it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we built the distribution first. So end of 2015, we were still basically purely e-com, but we had finished the repackaging, and we felt like at that point we were ready for retail, ready to at least go into retail and see whether or not we would work on the traditional shelves. Because at that point, we were proven online, at least to ourselves. The funny thing is no one knew. You can't tell how big a business is when they're just online. Right. Whereas once you go into the retail channels, now there's some publicly available data that could tell you how big a company is. So we'd have people come up to us, and they'd say, someday you guys are going to get to $1 million in sales. And we were way beyond that. And we were like, thank you. I hope so.
You had to be itching for that retail market. I mean, here you saw, we don't go after retail as much as we used to. It's big part of our business still. Yeah. But we go after, distribution and industrial and a lot more nowadays. But when you were on board, right, you were contacting the retail people with us and going out and knocking on doors with us. Yeah. So you had to be itching to go after that market eventually,
totally.
Right?
Yeah. And so in the food space, we did a great job online, and online is becoming a bigger and bigger part of the food market. But the big market still today is in traditional brick and mortar. More people buy their groceries in a Kroger or a Walmart or a Target than they do online today. And so we always knew that was a part of the plan, and the question was just when. And we wanted to make sure that the business was ready, that we had the funds ready to support it when we went in, and that the product was ready, that we felt really good about the product consistency, the product quality, the look and the feel of the product, the packaging. So once we felt like we were in a pretty good spot, then we started to look into traditional retail.
What was what's that number? Was there a couple numbers you said, okay, once we get to these numbers, we should be ready, right?
We didn't have a specific number, but we wanted, basically the big thing was, we'd always heard that when you go into traditional retail, you start to sell to distributors, and then you're going to get all these chargebacks that they're going to say, hey, we bought your bars for $5, but we're only paying you $2 because of all these things. And so we were nervous. We thought, we built this great business and we don't want to ruin it by charging too hard into a distribution strategy that we're not familiar with. And none of us were from food. So we're figuring all this out as we go. And so originally, actually, this speaks to our mindset a lot, but originally we tried to do it without any traditional distribution. And so our first retailer was actually Hy-Vee's stores, which are all through the Midwest, and they're usually locally owned or locally managed. And you can literally call a Hy-Vee and get transferred to the nutritionist, who is oftentimes an amazing resource for their customers because they're a nutritionist on staff to help the customers figure out what to eat. And so we thought, what better person in retail for us to, bring into the fold? And so we would call these nutritionists, say, hey, we want to sell you RX bars, but we're not in distribution. And we would literally ship FedEx boxes of RX bars to the front door of grocery stores. So no distribution, but we were FedExing bars to these Hy-Vees. And then they would pay us with checks in the mail, which, like, to anybody in the food space, it's like, that is the most insane thing I've ever heard. But so we pretty quickly figured out that we really couldn't go much further with that model. Because, the big guys just aren't even going to talk to you about that. Yeah. And so we built a really strong relationship first with UNFI and then with KeHE, who are two of the biggest distributors in the food space. And actually, our first account was the result of that original strategy. When we thought, hey, we can just sell into these things direct, we don't need to partner with a distributor, we shipped bars to, probably every buyer in the country. And one of them was Wegmans. And they called and they said, hey, we got your bars. We'd love to bring them in, but you got to come in through UNFI. So we said, all right. At that point, we had sort of realized we needed to go that route. And so at that point, we started to partner with distributors.
So I have a lot of friends who they're amazing bakers, or that they're really good at that whole aspect of a business, specifically in food services. And I think a lot of people would say that a lot of people try in that field, and I think their whole goal is to get inside a Whole Foods or a Target. And I know you kind of spoke on that. What are probably some barriers of entry that you feel for people who have a business or they're starting a business from scratch in the food industry? Like, watch out for this, because get ready for it, because if you expect to be in a Whole Foods, et cetera.
So the common focus for food entrepreneurs is the barriers of entry that are sort of the most obvious, which are getting into distribution, getting the retailer to say yes, getting the manufacturing capacity to make it, and all those things. And no question, those are barriers. Right. But the biggest barrier is the consumer. If the consumer doesn't want it, doesn't know about it, isn't asking Target to bring it onto their shelves, then why would Target do it? And so that was the big difference with RXBar, was we had cleared that barrier. And the most important barrier is the consumer. So we had built such a strong relationship with the consumer through our online business that by the time we were talking to Target was already well aware of us. And they had seen the success that we were having online, and they were seeing the posts on Instagram, and they were seeing the consumer awareness. And so then that makes Target excited, because Target's, they have physical space that's very valuable. Right. And so they don't want to risk it on just any brand. And so when we could come to Target and say, hey, look, we have all this consumer awareness and we're going to support the business in these ways, then Target was excited to work with us. It was less of a risk on their end. So I think the biggest barrier is the connection to the consumer.
So now you've gone into distribution at this point, right? And back then and still today. What part is that now compared to otherwise?
Yeah, so it's a big part of the business now, the distribution versus the e-com piece. But I have to be careful because we're part of a publicly traded company, but it's a big part of the business. Yeah, the distribution side, and just the traditional brick and mortar side of grocery is a huge market.
Are there any stores you're not in right now? Like a Walmart, Target, and then these
almost all stores we're in. We're not in any super hard discounters, so like dollar store kind of things we haven't gone into yet. There's a handful of other like kind of big box style discounters, like Grocery Outlet on the West Coast and things like that usually specialize in short coded product, meaning product that's about to expire. or maybe packaging changeovers, things like that. But all kind of where you shop traditionally for grocery stores, we're in almost all of them.
Yeah, I remember in 2000, let's say 14, 15, I'd see your bar somewhere. I'd get so excited.
Yeah.
Whoa, they're here at the, at this little grocer or wherever it might be, right? And I mean, it's crazy. You see them everywhere. It's so fun to see these things everywhere. And I take pictures and text them to you sometimes. But I was in Beverly Hills Hotel 2 weeks ago at the Abundance 360. So it's CEOs from all over the world, the technology conference, and I got invited to this thing. It's really a fun thing. But I'm at the store there, and there's a huge rack of RXBars. Right? I'm like, whoa! I didn't know you had. I never heard of that one. Right before I'm looking at these, and I'm telling my friends all these crazy tech people that I was with 2 different friends of mine. They're crazy tech guys, and tell them the story. Right? And they're like, whoa, that's awesome! Yeah, I love these things. Both guys knew all about them. It's like one of their favorite bars now. But it's so fun to go anywhere in the country now, probably eventually in the world, and I'm going to be able to see RX. So
yeah. I love those techs.
How fun is it, right, for you to see
awesome.
this stuff go on, right? To be in the middle of it, it's got to be so gratifying.
Yeah, I remember there was a guy early on. He makes a product called Diana's Bananas. He's a local Chicago guy. These chocolate-covered bananas, and he told us, he was like, "You'll be so proud that you make a physical thing that you can give people." And I didn't totally understand what he was saying, but he's so right, that I can walk into somebody's house and give them something, or have you, across the country see it and get excited. It's really cool.
Yeah, no, it's got to be so fun, so much fun, and it's like I don't know a market that it wouldn't be good for. Like like you're saying, at first it was this CrossFit market, but how are these not good for like any market? Right? I mean, they're healthy, they taste awesome, right? They're cool. So.
Well, one thing I see here that in 3 years you all went from 2 million to 130 million in 3 years, and that's pretty good. And that means
that's pretty good growth. That's
amazing.
Better than average. I bet that's better than
you're
average.
Right. Actually, it's not even pretty.
We looked at the
phenomenal.
data. If you look at the data, I think this should be better than average.
Exactly. I look at all the analytics, and I think any person would want their business to be there. But that also means that you all probably are more than likely hired some amazing people to assist you all in that way. So what was you all's strategy? Because they always say one of the reasons why most people fail is because they don't have the right team. Yeah. So what did that look like? How did you all create that?
Yeah. I actually just had this conversation with someone, and a super high growth environment like that is different than hiring in a more stable environment. And there's a couple big differences. One is that you don't need to hire a supply chain person who has run a big supply chain business for 30 years. You need someone who knows how to build it. And those are totally different skill sets. And someone who can keep up with the supply chain that's needed for a $10 million business and then the one that's needed for a $200 million business. The ability to scale and adapt is really hard. And so we went through a bunch of iterations of our interviewing process, and we were self-aware enough early on that we knew we had to pay very close attention to how we hired, and we had to build a system for hiring and really a system for evaluating the humans that are walking in our doors, because it's very hard. And one of the consistent elements that we uncovered was, if you are self-aware and have the ability to be vulnerable, you have a better chance at success in that environment. And the reason is, if you're going to go from $2 million business to a $130 million business, I can almost guarantee you your role is going to change, no matter what role you're in, right?
So sometimes for the better, more challenging role, paying more money. Sometimes not. Sometimes you're just not fit or not passionate enough to go to that next level.
Exactly. And one of the big things is, if you can't honestly admit that, hey, I'm in a new role or the company's in a new era, and either I think I can get there, but I don't have the skills right now, so I got to go find them, or I've got to hire the right team, or I've got to, if you can't do that, you're going to get just run over by the growth. And so one of the big breakthroughs for us was figuring out how to identify someone who was self-aware enough to keep up with that growth. And sometimes that meant, like, what was really amazing was we got to a point in the company where people would voluntarily raise their hands and give up responsibility, which you rarely see in a corporate environment.
Wow.
And that's self-awareness.
And it was because they were like, you know what? I want to be on this team. I know that self-awareness is valued here. I know I'm out over my skis, and I've got 2 departments that should be 2 instead of just 1. And I'm going to like raise my hand and say, hey, we should hire somebody to run this, and I should focus on this. And that was incredible, because then you just have a team that's all working towards one goal instead of trying to create little fiefdoms. And it really made a huge difference in our growth.
So Sam, we use the EOS system today. You heard of that?
I think so.
Entrepreneurial operating system that we use today, and we started like 2 years ago. When I first dug into this, like 6-7 years ago, you were on board. You were on our team when I dug into this originally. You may have heard me talking about back then, but the book tells you.
Was that Traction?
Yeah. Remember I brought that book in?
Yeah, and Leotold was like that too a little bit.
He was different than Traction, but similar, right? But with Traction, the book Traction, and then the EOS system, it totally reiterates over and over. If you have any selfishness on your team, right, or lack of self-awareness, right, you can't do this. You can't do the program. Don't even think about it, right? And if you remember, it was my friend Shelly's son who was doing it back then. Shelly grew a business from back then $30 million to $500 million or so now, right? I mean, whatever it is, it's a big organization, Bright Star, and back then. I read this book and I said, God, we got some work to do, right? Maybe myself, maybe some of my teammates, we have some work to do before we can do the system. And through a lot of challenge we had in our business and some big losses, and I got to be really lean a few years ago after your departure, right? We had some issues, and mostly because now I think of it, it's because of Sam they had all those issues. He left us.
He left you.
But we had some major issues, big losses, loss in profits, like a huge chunk of change we lost in 8 months, right? And bottom line is I had to look, and after I got very lean, some of our team members went on to great things, and they've got great opportunities somewhere else. Others, we didn't promote as well maybe, but some we realized didn't have that selflessness, right? And by the time we got through it all and things cranked up within a few years, we became very, very solid financially and paid down all that debt and all the things we had to do. But we realized we were in shape now to try Traction and the EOS system. So 2 years ago we did it, and it's working amazingly, right? But every meeting we have, whether it's a weekly L10 or it's a quarterly meeting with the leaders, we look around the room, man, and if there's any of this selfishness and lack of awareness, self-awareness, then we're questioning it. We're calling people out, because again, that's the key. If you're gonna have a vision, a clear vision and a system to execute that vision that you can create that everybody buys into, boy, you better have those leaders on the team that are willing to be held accountable, right, to the values you create or you build as a team, right? Yeah. And if you don't have it, you're done. So it's amazing. It's awesome that you guys as young leaders realized that so early on and hired that way.
Yeah, we used we could kind of feel it, but the first system that we brought in was this thing called DISC.
Yeah, sure.
And so
Mike Maritish always uses this.
Yeah, and it's really kind of focused on communication, but it's really personality styles. Right. But that was the first time that we had really done sort of objective self-reflection, where you take an exam and you look at where you fall on the pie chart, and you're like, oh man, I might be really running people over. Yeah. And so that was the first thing, and then we progressively added more and more onto it. We did Hogan about a year ago, which is a more in-depth process, but the amount of time we spent on helping people discover a deeper understanding of who they are, their strengths, their weaknesses, how they show up, it pays huge dividends.
Absolutely. And many people are going to rise to the occasion and discover that they want more, right? They want to be bigger part of this vision. Then some people will actually have the self-awareness, say, you know what, I'm happy where I'm at, and that's invaluable too. You need those people that are great at what they do, that are okay with continually training others to be great at that in that role and supporting, right? Yeah. So that's awesome.
Is it because the question I want to ask you, I just want to make sure it's public knowledge about who you all have been acquired by? Yeah. Okay. So, and obviously the acquisition and about how much it was, 600 million. Like, how did that knock on the door? I think that's every food entrepreneur's dream. How did that happen? How did that come about? Yeah. Well, let's start there. How did that come about?
Well, and let me add one more thing you can throw in there is the fact that no fundraising before this point.
No fundraising, by the way.
Everybody believes they got to raise funds. They got to raise funds. They got to go out for a round, and you guys didn't, which is awesome.
Yeah, it's the fundraising thing has become kind of like a cultural thing in entrepreneurship, and like I mentioned before, I was just sort of lucky. The guys who I looked up to ran paper businesses. You know what I mean? They weren't out there like pitching Silicon Valley VCs. They're making paper profitably and over time. Yeah. And the same was true. So Peter and Jared, Peter's father had advice for Peter early on and Jared that, hey, you just got to go sell some bars. Like, don't go spend your time making a PowerPoint deck about what you're going to do. Go do it. And then if at some point you need money, you'll figure that out, but really just start one foot in front of the other. And so that was sort of that was baked into our DNA from the beginning. And then as far as Kellogg, we went through a formal sale process. So we hired a banker. She basically introduced the company to 50 or so strategics through a very high level intro of the company, where it's at, general revenue, that kind of thing. And then that list gets narrowed down to the final bidders over a 6 or so month process. And then, and we go through management presentations that are basically like a day-long presentation of the business to some of these potential acquirers. And one of the things with Kellogg that was important to us was that there was cultural alignment. So we had built this really strong culture based on self-awareness and authenticity and vulnerability. And we thought it was really unique and special. And so one of the things that was so important to us throughout the process was that we evaluate the culture of the business that would be acquiring us, and basically reserve the right to say no if we felt like, hey, this is just not going to work for the team that we built. And so it ended up being Kellogg, and they're an amazing business, and they brought a global perspective and a bunch of other things.
Were there any seconds and thirds out there that were pretty attractive too?
Yeah, I mean, there were other strategics that were definitely interested and interesting for a variety of reasons. Yeah.
And in this case, you were on your way to revenues of over 100 million. You weren't there yet.
We were the end of the process was end of Q3
of 2017.
So basically, the year was pretty much baked, and we were going to be well north of 100 million by the time the acquisition happened. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And then what's changed now since Kellogg's become your partner? Where are you and your partners at now in this whole organization? How's that going?
Yeah. So Kellogg they've lived up to everything that they said up front and that they've said publicly, which is they want RXBar to stand alone and operate as an independent business, which was really important to us because we had built a business that could stand on its own. And so that's still true today. You know, the team's still running the business, and the business keeps growing, and things are really good.
So what's your position there now?
I'm our COO.
Of?
RXBar.
RXBar.
Yeah.
And then how about your partners? Where are they at?
Peter's our CEO, and then Jared's an advisor to the business, but he's not involved day to day.
Wow. And what's the direction? Where are you going to be in 10 years in this business? Who can you model after out there that you know you can kick the snot out of?
Yeah, I mean, so Cliff Bar is a $1 billion business, and so there's no reason to think that the RXBar bar business can't be on the same level as Cliff Bar, if not bigger. I mean, the trends would be in our favor, and Cliff has shown that you can get a brand that size. What Cliff's done incredibly well is they've built a phenomenal team. And like in the early days, we would try to recruit people, and they wouldn't even let us finish our sentence before they would say, I'm not leaving. And so that's not an easy task. It's not like it's a lay down, but clearly there's someone who's done it. So I think that's one. And then I think the RXBar team could be a platform for early stage businesses. You know, I think they can handle more than just one brand in RXBar.
And right now, I mean, from where you were a few years ago, you've got more flavors, right? You've got the butter. Now, tell me about where you're at now, and how far is too far before you spread out too thin.
It's a good question. So where we are today, we have more flavors than we've ever had. We've got seasonal flavors like gingerbread and pumpkin spice.
I like pumpkin spice.
Pumpkin spice is good.
Everybody likes pumpkin around pumpkin time.
Pumpkin spice was like one of the first big influencer, like formal campaigns that we did. We sent out taste testers of pumpkin spice to the influencers who got like an early access look at a flavor we were developing, which went really well. But so yeah, and then we've got the nut butters, and those have done really, really well. And we've got the kids line as well. So the brand is in a good place. I don't think it's spread
Have you tried
too
the
thin.
nut butters yet?
I haven't.
Oh, the nut butters are awesome.
Get on. I've got some in my refrigerator.
Okay, well, there we go.
I'm going to pass them on to you. The first couple will be free. Once you're hooked, though, once you're hooked,
I'll just come to Sam. I'll just come to Sam.
So I don't think we're too thin yet, but that's always a concern, is that you don't spread the brand too thin.
So one of the things I wanted to, and I feel like when I had a conversation, I remember I called you the other day, and I was really like, hey, let me ask you a question. And he's literally talking to me, but yet saying, hey, how you doing? And literally everybody's trying to stop Sam to ask a question. I'm pretty sure you get a lot of people trying to come at you from an entrepreneur perspective. And then obviously you spoke at Google, as far as, Google, you spoke at Google, and you're speaking all over the place. And I'm pretty sure a lot of entrepreneurs want to know some of the things to get success on their own. What are probably into entrepreneurs today? If there were certain things that you feel that all entrepreneurs need to have today, what would that be in order for them to get some scalability or success like you've had?
So I think the first thing that they should know is that it isn't sexy. It looks like it in retrospect, like the headline now for us is, in 4 years, RXBar acquired by Kellogg for $600 million. But it wasn't like we were like just, the route there is really hard and pretty, you grind it out. It's not like it's this pretty, sexy headline kind of thing. It's really like kind of an ugly, hard, not sexy process. And for a while, like I actually think of Jimmy John all the time, like, for a while, he was just a guy who made sandwiches, and that's not that sexy. But now that it's Jimmy John's, it's sexy. So I think that's the biggest thing for entrepreneurs to know is if you don't like the process, like if you don't actually like getting up and doing it every day, it's not going to be very much fun because you have this outcome that you're working towards, and very rarely do you get it. And so I think that's the biggest thing is that like it's a grind, and you have to really like it.
Yeah, not everybody's blessed to be in paving. It's just always sexy, and it looks just sexy, right?
Yeah,
it just smells so good.
And so when you went from asphalt and concrete to this,
right?
It was no problem because you went from the sexy business, and you could actually,
I could always fall back on that.
You always fall back on it if you had to.
Yeah. That's true.
Yeah. Cool. What else you got for me?
Man, I so much more. I just don't. I want to kind of keep them to myself, to be honest with you. I guess one of the last things, as we're winding down, when it comes to mentorship, I believe mentorship, as you said earlier, is an extremely important part to your success. Who are some of the mentors that you look at? Some of the people you definitely consider are influencers to you to kind of keep you focused on leaving a legacy daily. You know?
Yeah. So when I was a kid, my parents first, just seeing how they worked was huge for me. But then Andy McKenna, who was the chairman of the board at McDonald's for a long time, was kind enough to give me some of his time. And I did not deserve it at all. This guy is busy with super, super important high level stuff. And he would give me a half an hour here or there, and I could just ask him questions about leadership or what he'd seen. And so he was incredibly formative for me. And then there's a bunch of others, but the CEO at LiveWatch, Brad Moorhead, Feldco, Doug Cook, Gary, and then there's dozens of others. I think that's probably what I've done best is have built relationships with people who have seen more than I've seen. But the mentors are invaluable.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of these you mentioned, Andy McKenna is one that, so many people I know, I've met him a couple of times, listened to him, and, just listening to his story and listening to him, you're gonna take something away from him if you really care, right?
Yeah. And the best part about him is if you don't know him, you have no idea who he is. But he's this like quietly, incredibly influential guy who's seen so much.
Yeah, and I think about some of the stuff you've done and how you pay attention to everything. You're a sponge, and that's huge. If you're passionate about stuff, you're a sponge, right? You're gonna take a lot away from things that other people wouldn't, right? And I look at your the emotional intelligence stuff and the way you hire. I remember when you and I and a group of us were doing a forum, right? And what did we do? We focused on self-awareness, and actually Q is building that back in our organization right now through True Mentors. He's got a product that he's building within our organization right now where we start going back to those forums, right? Because after you left, that fell apart too, Sam. Sam blew that too on us. He left. We had this great forum, this intimate forum with a bunch of our leaders, and Sam leaves, and Sam's gone now, man. We can't do this anymore.
Just took it away everything.
It's funny because we actually had Nick moved out of state, and a couple other things happened, and sure enough, that fell apart. But Brad and the leaders today, Austin, these guys saying we got to do that again, man. That was awesome, right? And again, you picked up on that and use it in your business, and that was something we learned through Big Jim, Jimmy John's dad, Big Jim, if you remember. Putting that together, the forum experience focused on leading with emotional intelligence, right? Yeah. And again, you're a great example of that. So it's awesome. Yeah. Awesome stuff.
Man, so I got some takeaways, man.
Well, you know what? Just before the takeaways, the only other thing I want to say is, we talk about life work balance and all these things, right? And I kind of believe most of that's a bunch of BS, right? I think if you're a great father, a great husband, and great in business, you can do all those things and kind of balance it as your partner at home can handle. I look at that sometimes as a BS, and not that we don't need to pay attention to how much time we spend with our families and how much at work, but overall, I mean, if you're an entrepreneur, you're going to have to work your butt off, and you're going to be working sometimes at home, and you're going to be doing stuff laying in bed, as you said, you've been an amazing example of this when I look at the family you're building and that awesome wife that you have and these beautiful kids you've got. Tell us just a little bit about that.
Yeah. Thank you for asking. So, in the first place, I wouldn't have taken this path without marrying my wife. So she comes from, her father's an entrepreneur, so she kind of understands what it means, the side that's not sexy and not fun. And so when I was originally leaving finance to go work for this home security business that was west of Topeka, Kansas, she was like, yeah, you should do that. And I think it's very rare for anybody to understand what a good opportunity that was. So that's first and foremost. And I always tell people, so the other question to entrepreneurs is like, you have to pick your partner very wisely. It's either going to be a wind at your back or a huge problem for you if you want to be a successful business person. And then the best part is, so we have two young boys, a 3-month-old and a 2.5-year-old. And no matter how successful you are, I come home the day the Kellogg deal is announced and I'm king of the world. And James throws up on me or, tells me to get out of here. And, he doesn't care at all. And so they're amazing. They're so grounding and they teach you a lot too. James is negotiating with me all day long. And so he's got me sharp.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And so you think of family and what that means, right? I mean, if some days some weeks you're gonna work crazy hours, and that family, if it's a great family and a great wife, she's gonna be there for you, and some hopefully it creates the blessings of success and the ability to take a week off at a time, right? And spend that time with your family and everything else. If we think of that culture at home and then culture at work, I mean, can you match culture at work to be as family oriented and fun oriented, even in a public setting like you have today? Are you able to take that culture that you built, emotional intelligence and self-awareness and the family atmosphere I know you're about, right, at work as well? are you able to do that in a public setting?
Yeah, I mean, I think they reinforce each other. So the emotional intelligence stuff that we did professionally was done to get a better outcome at work. But you start to realize, actually, this stuff applies everywhere, and if my wife and I are coming to problems from a position of each understanding how we operate, because we're very different, that actually improves our likelihood of being happy and coming up with good outcomes. And then I think at work, Peter, Jared, and I, and then the fourth person who was at RXBar back in those days was Jessie, and she's also a grade school friend of ours. And so the benefit that we had, it could be a little messy because of that, but at the same time, we had built-in culture and built-in values alignment that we didn't really appreciate until we went to actually go formalize it for the company. We realized, in the early days, we took it for granted because it's like you don't go home and write down your values usually. You kind of know what they are. And so I definitely think there's a lot of overlap there. The tough thing on the professional side is there are some professional decisions that have to be kind of separated from the personal relationship. So Peter and I were really open with each other that our personal relationship just had to take a back seat during the run-up of our RXBar, because if he was showing me favoritism because I was his friend, that would impact the way that the business was run. So we had to be thoughtful about it, but I still think it's a massive net positive if you can take some of those things into the workplace.
Tell me, COO now. You're sales, leader of the sales force, marketing, sales. Now COO, different hat, pretty much, right? Tell me how those compare and what you're able to bring to that position to be strong enough to be the COO.
Yeah, so the COO is really, it's more of a leadership expansion of responsibilities than a tactical one. So if someone got sick on the sales team and I had to dive in and jump into their role, I probably wouldn't be as good as them, but I could do it. Marketing, same thing. Supply chain, not true. It's not my area of expertise, but I'm pretty good at building teams and leading, and so it was more of a leadership expansion than it was a tactical representation. So I could never do our chief supply chain officer's job. He's amazing, and I just couldn't do his job. No way.
Well, and they're good. And that's self-awareness. And I love hearing that out of you, because some of us think we can do it all and we're the best at everything, and some have self-awareness, and you're an example of that. So it's really cool. Something I'd like to ask also is, when I travel across the world and I meet people from all over the world. I'm blessed that I'm in some organizations where I get to meet a lot of different people, and I believe that there's nowhere else this could be done. The successes, the 37-year overnight success I've had, and 4, 5, 10-year overnight success you've had, right? I just don't believe it could be done in other parts of the world like it can in the U.S. I mean, what's your feeling towards that?
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. I mean, not only just from the standpoint that you can create something and go out and sell it without much limitation, but also the size of our market. As we started to reach the end of the new distribution in the U.S., we started to look at other markets, and they're just not nearly as big, and they're much harder to work with, and that's where someone like Kellogg has deep expertise that we don't. But the Canadian market, for most food companies, best case is 10% of the size of the U.S. market. So not only do you have an incredible amount of freedom here to go build, but you also have a lot of size. So you could build a really substantial business without having to leave the border.
It's a great point. The other parts of the world that do have this drive for free enterprise, right, like Israel and some others, much smaller markets, so their goal is usually to get here, right? Yeah. Produce this product, to figure out this amazing value proposition, then get to U.S., yeah. Right? Which is exciting, because we're blessed that we're in the middle of it, right? Yeah. I was look at my friends here and that are appreciative of this and have gratitude of this environment we're in, right? Oh, yeah. And say, man, we better make sure we hold on to it, yeah. Right? For our kids, for your kids in the future, so they can do the same thing. Yeah. So. Good stuff. Okay, Q, yeah. Go ahead, buddy. Throw them at us.
Man, Jesus, I just got so many Quinton's true takeaways today, man. So one of the first things you started with and I hope you all are writing this down as you're listening to it as well. The best leaders are trusted and respected, and I think that's really keen and it's actually pretty true to both of these leaders right here. But as we start getting more into RXBar, niches are really powerful. Stay in the niche as long as you can. I mean, I think that's really cool, and simplicity is key. I think a lot of people try to like as you said, the simpler it is, the easier it is for others to promote it, right? And if it is easier for them to promote it, it means easier for everybody to understand. And it's cool to that. When it comes to the product itself, for our food entrepreneurs, consistent product quality is important for traditional retail. But the most important barrier is the consumer. And I felt that was kind of like back and forth, like that's the person you're going for. But if they don't like it, then you probably shouldn't be out there doing it. Pay close attention on how you hire as you scale fast. But one of the two biggest things I got is entrepreneurship isn't sexy, man. I mean, I think we see a lot out here of the people that think you could just do this and wake up early in the morning and just walk outside and here you are. But like you said, man, the title sounds nice. We got bought by Kellogg with $600 million, but they forget that was blunt for sweat equity for over, at least 60 months or so. But the most important thing you got on here that I love is build relations with people who have seen more than you have. And I think your success is a testament to that. And I'm just blessed to know you and have you in my back pocket, Sam, as well as you, Gary. So it's been pretty cool.
And you covered everything there, I think. But the only thing I liked a lot was selflessness, hire for selflessness and self-awareness, right? I mean, if you can hire people that are selfless, right, that just want to do good things and want to serve, right, and then the self-awareness to understand where your strengths and weaknesses are, and if you can raise your hand and say, man, this just isn't me. I know this is opportunity for more money, but it's not me, right? So let's help. I'm going to help you find somebody else, right, for the spot. I mean, if you can build a team like that, Sam, that's just incredible, and I know you'll continue to focus on these things and do the great stuff you're doing. Yeah. So I really appreciate. I forgot about this. I'm looking at this card I got from Sam, and it was cool. One of the coolest things is after they sold, he sent me a really nice card with the 9 different flavors on it, and besides the fact that I got a tear in my eye after seeing this, I got hungry for RXBars. So. RXBars, you know what, Cliff, watch out, baby. We're gonna kick your ass. No, I'm so excited for RX and where it's going with your leadership and Peter's leadership. So thanks for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll see you all next time on Ditch Digger CEO.
See ya.